Speaking isn't a common mistake people who are new to public speaking make is they think it's just about words. You write down all the words there and everything's fine, no problem. You just write them all down and say them and that's it, you're done. But you aren't done. Because speaking is more than just about saying a bunch of words. For one thing, when you have words written down, there's all these other words around it. So people get confused, not quite certain what your point is. They can see all the words around it and they get the sense of it. Oh yeah, I get it now. And if they don't understand this part, they can always skip ahead, look down the page a little bit. Oh, that's right, that's where you explain that. Or if they forget something, they can always read it over again. Didn't quite get that point? Oh yeah. Read it over again and over again. Now I got it. But when you're presenting, you don't have those things. Can't read it over again. Sorry. There's no jumping down to the next section to see what you really meant. And the only words those people get are the words that are coming out of your mouth. There's no words around that to understand how things actually are, what you really meant to say. That's why it's very common in presentations, particularly by politicians, get themselves in some real hot water because some things that sounded good written down just don't work when they're presenting. So you've got to be aware of that. Be aware of those differences. Sure, you can write things down. That's fine. Get your ideas out. But when you present, it's different. It's a different story. It's important to keep that in mind. It raises all sorts of questions. Well, speaking is more than words, then what the heck is speaking? If words aren't what it's all about, what is it all about? What are in thinking that speaking is words? What are some of the problems you can have if you think that speaking is all words? Those are the sort of things we're going to talk about today. Those are the things that are important to understand because as a speaker, those are errors that are made. You go out there, you think, hey, just a bunch of words, no problem, I got this down, here we go. Doesn't work like that. Because no matter what you say and how great the word's written down, people don't see things written down when you're presenting. They can't go back over it. Everything you present happens inside that audience's head. An area you can't really control. So inside that audience's head, they get a sense of what you're saying. And that's it. They can't go back and jump forward, etc. They depend entirely upon what they're hearing and how they're hearing it and the way they're hearing it. That has a lot more to do than just the words on the page. And it's important to understand that. And important to understand the consequences of that. Because everything happens inside the audience's mind, not on the words you wrote down. Very important to understand. So there are several things you need to understand when you're presenting. Very, very important to get these things. Because if you don't, your next speech could be a disaster. But don't worry. We'll talk about what those things are, why they're so important, how you use them, where you use them, what they're really all about. And figuring out what does it mean to have something be more than words. Words are great, wonderful, all written down, organized, but that's not going to carry you through as a presenter. It's not going to get you to that next step in your presentation. Speaking is more than words. Today, we're going to talk about what speaking actually is, how speaking actually works, how you can make sure you don't make the common mistakes other presenters make when they're presenting. It's really important to understand that all the stuff that comes out of our mouths is not what the audience gets. The audience gets what's in their mind. So no matter what you say, all that really matters is what the audience thinks you said. Now that can be a little confusing. You might put it down. I wrote it down. I know what I'm saying. It's perfectly clear what the meaning of these words are. How can there be any confusion about what's going on when I start talking? That's a good question. And I'll give you an example of how that might work. Let's say you want to motivate people to get out there and get going and get things done. And your whole point is that if you don't get out there and get going, you're not going to get anywhere. But you don't want to say you're not going to get anywhere. You think that sounds too boring. So you say it this way instead. In life, you have to get out there and get going. Really motivate yourself to make progress, to move forward. Because if you don't motivate yourself and get going, that retards your progress in life. Now, all you meant to say was that slows down your progress. You don't progress as quickly. You slow down. If you put things off, you don't go as quickly as to where you would normally go in life. That's what you meant to say. However, in the audience's mind, the word retard has a huge meaning. And it's on all different sorts of different ways. One meaning is stupid. Another meaning is to have someone who is developmentally challenged at birth or through some accident. They're mentally challenged or some other way their brain is not operating the correct way, so they have challenges getting along in life. Now, both of these images are very powerful in your audience's mind. And notice, neither one of these has anything to do with what you're talking about. But if you aren't aware and mindful of how your audience is thinking, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Because just saying retards your progress, some people could think it's an insult. And all they hear is retard, or retard, or retarded. That's all they hear. Don't hear anything else. Once they hear retarded, that's it, you're gone. Because remember, when you're speaking, you can't look around everything that you said. All you've got is the words you gave. So that's what your audience hears. Retarded. And that means stupid. So you just called your audience a stupid. That's some people. Now let's say out there in your audience is a developmentally challenged person. They hear the term that is used nastily towards them to describe them. Not stupid, but beyond stupid. And there's a problem. So just the very term retarded has huge issues. On one hand, it's just an insult. On the other hand, it's an insult to developmentally challenged people. So in general, you want to try to stay away from that. Recently, the White House's Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, found out just how powerful that word retarded is. And he said some things that I can't repeat here because they'd be definitely censored. But his basic idea was, that's stupid. That's all he really meant to say, that's stupid. But he wanted to make it sound strong, he wanted to make it sound powerful, he wanted to make it sound forceful, so he said, that's retarded. He wasn't mindful of his audience. He meant to say stupid, said retarded, and thought everyone will just think it's stupid. No. A lot of people thought that he was insulting mentally challenged people. They got real upset about him. He was forced to give an apology, which kind of cuts down your credentials as a speaker if you apologize for everything you just said. So remember, always be mindful of your audience. It's not what you write down. It's how the audience hears it in their head. A speaker has to have an emotional connection with their audience. Now, by this, I don't mean when you come out here, you need to cry. I'm so tough, No. If you want to do that, go ahead. I don't recommend it. And there are some speakers who like to get real emotional with their audience. And that's fine too. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you have to touch your audience. You have to touch your audience's emotions. Remember back to the very beginning? I said that people make decisions based on their emotions. It means you got to rattle those emotions somehow. Get them going. Got to make people feel. Think about things. And that doesn't mean you as a speaker need to be emotional. It means you need to make your audience emotional. They may not show it, but you might want to get them a little worried, a little scared. Those are motivating emotions. People get worried, scared, nervous. They're motivated to do things. So as a speaker, it's in your best interest to try to help those emotions along with your speech. Or you want to motivate people perhaps to get things done and get going in their life. Fine. Move around like a jumping jack if it doesn't affect your audience. You want to make sure you connect with your audience's emotions. It's great to be all sorts of an emotional speaker doing all sorts of things up here to get people going. But if what you're talking about doesn't connect with your audience's emotional point of view, get it. Wasted your time. So the first thing you need to do as a speaker is let the audience know that you yourself have emotions that are like theirs. This draws a comparison between you. All of a sudden you got the speaker, the audience, and there's a connection. There's something to compare there. So one of the most powerful ways to emotionally connect with an audience is to use what's called feel, felt, found. Or the 3 F's, if you want to look at it that way. Feel, felt, found. And the whole purpose is to get the audience to understand that you have feelings. You aren't just a speaker saying all sorts of stuff. You're a human being with real feelings, just like everybody out there. Make that emotional connection. So the first step in feel, felt, found is to say, understand how you feel. I get it. That's the connection. Just an understanding of the audience's feelings, of their happiness, their sadness, of the nervousness they're feeling. They're going through some sort of change they don't like. Just to let them know you understand how they feel. It creates that connection there. Then you say, I've often felt the same way myself. That's the next part. You get how the audiences feel. You sympathize, you understand what the audience is going through, and, bonus point, you yourself have had the same type of feelings. So you understand the audience. Just put your audience and you at the same level emotionally. I felt the same way myself. I get it. Understanding you feel, and I've had those sort of feelings. But recently I have found, That's the found part. That's where you're trying to move the audience beyond where they are and their feelings and their emotions into someplace different. I have found there's a different way to do things that hurts much less. That's easier, that's simpler, it's better. I want to talk to you about that. That's feel, felt, found. I feel, and I understand how you feel. I felt the same way, but now I've found, and then you move on to your point. It's a very simple, very powerful way to emotionally connect with your audience. Now, whether or not you use the exact words feel, felt, found doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you get to know your audience's feelings, you put yourself in the same level as your audience's feelings, and then you move them to a whole different level with your speech. This is a major difference between something written down on the page and a presentation. If something's written down on the page, then there's no confusion about what things mean. There's only one source of the information. If you say, the one point I want to make, if you see written down on the page, the one point I want to make, there's no question what's going on. With a presentation, it's also visual. So if you see somebody saying, the one point I want to make, you get confused. Because the speaker is saying one, but the visual says something different. Very important to understand that. Quite often in this world of PowerPoint and phone conferences, people forget that when they're presenting up there, they're up there. People can see you. People are looking at you. So you want to make sure that whatever you do up there goes with your speech. You aren't just up there to help along the PowerPoint. You're there to present. And if you aren't doing a phone conference, people are looking at you, looking for cues from you about what's going on. So one thing to be careful, because speaking is so visual, is watch your body language. If you do this up there, well, I'm really happy to see all you people. Great to be here. Wonderful place. Forget it. The words may be the right words, but the body language is aggressive, pushy, forceful, difficult. Not somebody you want to listen to. Be careful of the body language. And also, thinking about how you present, you say, the most important point is, don't do that. Point's important. You want to emphasize it by stepping forward. The most important point is, notice this makes you bigger. You get a little bigger in the audience's eyes. Temporarily, you get a little bigger, and then after you're done with that point, step back a little bit. Keep in mind when you're presenting that it's visual. The audience is looking at you. Everything you're doing up there. But that can be a good thing, because you can actually use your body. Use your body to get points across. If you have several points, you can use your body by moving from point to point to point. First point, second point, third point. Or, if you want to change from one subject to another, move across the stage. That'll also do it. If you're giving a story, talking about a story, telling the story, and you want people to understand where things are, and the person changes their location from Chicago to Seattle, have one place on the stage, you talk about the Chicago place, and then move over when you're talking about Seattle. There are all sorts of wonderful things you can do as a presenter to really help your audience and engage them and pull them in if you remember that as a presenter, you're visual. There's not just about the words down on the page. It's about actually them seeing you up there. How you look on stage, what you do on stage. It's a lot to do with how things go. So keep in mind when you're presenting that you want to make sure that your speech and your stage movements match. They get together. Be careful about how you appear. You want to have your hands down. You want to be in an open position so you look relaxed, comfortable, and inviting. And think about using your body, using your staging on the stage, where you're positioned on the stage, to help your audience better connect in with your speech. If you remember your speech is visual, there's no end to the wonderful things you can do to help with your audience and your audience's enjoyment of your speech. Your speech is more than words. All sorts of different things in speaking. One thing is the mindfulness. You must always be mindful that the speech doesn't happen with the words you've written down on the page. Instead, they happen in the listener's mind. And different minds will see different things. So you have to be aware and mindful of our speeches. Think about them, and think about them not only from our own point of view, but what do others think? How are others going to take it? Even the simplest word can have a completely different meaning in the audience's mind. The problem is, if the audience is thinking something different from what we're thinking, then that's it. We're done. The audience is going to go its own way, we're going our own way, and everything will be like this. Instead, you want to come together. So be mindful of your audience. Be aware of how the mind of your audience is working. And emotions. Never forget the emotions. Speaking has to touch somehow. Doesn't mean you have to be an emotional speaker, but it means you have to get to the audience's emotions. Hope, fear, desperation, worry, excitement. All these are different emotions a speaker can tap into and use. It's all about getting the audiences going, stirring them up, getting them excited. Get them interested in what you have to say. It's those emotions, touching those emotions, feeling what the audience feels. We talked about a very powerful way to do this is feel, felt, found. Which you as a speaker feel what the audience feels. And you say it, I understand what you feel. And maybe you can even describe it. You're feeling anger, you're feeling tense, you're feeling hatred, you're feeling annoyance, you're feeling boredom. I get it. I know what you're feeling. That's really useful because it's where you emotionally connect with your audience. And if you're good at it, it can seem like you're reading the audience's mind. They all think they're just talking to them. Each person out there feels you're talking directly to them. Know what you're feeling? I felt the same way. So you put your audience first, and then you bring yourself in the picture. I get it. I understand. I felt the same way. I felt just the same way you feel right now. The same anger, the same hate, the same worry, the same concern. Whatever it is the audience is feeling, we felt the same way. But I have found, and that's where you move on. You understand where the audience is. You put yourself in the same position. And then you move on. A powerful, emotionally connective tool. Connects you in with the audience and pulls the audience along with you. Because as you move on, so the rest of the audience has to move on. Never forget the emotions. And always remember the visual. Everybody out there, they're looking at us up here. Be aware of it. Make sure your movements go with what you're talking about. This whole piece, you've got a tremendous thing over live. Use that over written down text. But it's more mindful. Your audiences, use these three things. You will discover your audiences care more deeply, more profoundly, and more interestedly in your speech.